Welcome to Griffonomics. You know, usually when we think about medical breakthroughs, the mental image is fairly standard.
Yeah, very
Or
standard.
like we picture a sterile lab,
Yeah.
we picture pipettes, microscopes, maybe a highly engineered new piece of hardware.
Right. Clinical trials, scientists in white coats, that whole vibe.
Exactly. What we do not usually picture is a proprietary fleet of 22 private jets.
Yeah.
Or like a 247 aviation logistics command center.
Yeah, that's completely outside the norm.
And throw in a massive multi-million-dollar commercial real estate maneuver in Massachusetts, just for good measure.
Right. I mean, those assets belong in the portfolio of an international freight carrier, not a medical device company.
Exactly.
Seeing a healthcare technology firm suddenly, structure itself like an airline combined with a highly regulated utility, it's a massive anomaly.
And it is exactly the anomaly we are analyzing in our deep dive today. So
Okay.
our mission is to dissect how TransMedics trading under the ticker TMDX is actively transforming from a traditional medical device manufacturer into a vertically integrated end-to-end infrastructure monopoly.
Which is just a fascinating pivot.
It really is. And for this deep dive, we are pulling from a really dense stack of sources today. We've got their Q1 2026 earnings presentations, their 10K and 10Q financial filings, plus some great case studies on logistics scaling.
Mm-hmm. And don't forget the technical reveals from the April 2026 ISHLT conference. That stuff is crucial.
Oh yeah, the ISHLT data is mind-blowing. We will definitely get into that.
The transition they're attempting here, it fundamentally redefines how healthcare technology is delivered and, frankly, monetized.
Right.
They are demonstrating that sometimes, just creating a revolutionary product, it isn't enough to capture the market.
No, absolutely not. And for you listening, whether you are managing a portfolio or maybe you're analyzing supply chain logistics or tracking corporate strategy, TransMedics is offering a complete masterclass in what happens when a company decides that to sell its product, it has to literally build the entire industry's delivery infrastructure from scratch.
From the ground up.
Okay, let's unpack this. To understand the absolute massive financial and logistical moves they're making right now, we first have to understand the core technology. Like, why was the traditional model of just selling the medical device not enough?
Right. So historically, and this is a bit wild when you really think about it, the gold standard for preserving an organ during a transplant has been static cold storage.
Which sounds very technical, but...
But in practice, it literally means placing a donor organ into a commercial cooler packed with melting ice.
Which is just crazy. I mean, we were talking about the most precious, time-sensitive biological payloads on the planet, right?
Yep.
And they're being transported using the exact same thermal technology I used to keep drinks cold at a weekend barbecue.
Exactly. A Yeti cooler or a Ryobi box. And the clinical limitations of that are severe.
I would imagine.
Yeah, because static cold storage puts the organ into a state of suspended animation, but ischemic damage, basically cellular degradation, begins immediately.
Right.
So TransMedics developed a proprietary alternative called the Organ Care System, or OCS.
Right.
It remains the only FDA-approved portable multi-organ warm perfusion platform.
Warm perfusion.
Yes. Instead of putting an organ on ice to just slow down the inevitable damage, the OCS keeps it alive. It replicates near physiologic conditions outside the human body.
Right. So inside this portable console, a donor heart is actively beating.
Yes.
Lungs are actually breathing. Livers are producing bile while in transit.
Exactly. It functions as a miniaturized mobile intensive care unit built around a single organ.
Wow.
And here's the friction point implementation. TransMedics had this groundbreaking hardware, but their go-to-market strategy originally relied on individual hospitals buying the console.
Right, the traditional sales model.
Yeah. The hospitals had to maintain the hardware, train their own clinical personnel to operate them, and then personally manage the chaotic logistics of, chartering private flights in the middle of the night.
I mean, transplant teams are already operating at maximum capacity.
Exactly. Asking a chief of surgery or a hospital administrator to suddenly become an expert in warm perfusion management and ad hoc aviation logistics, it created a massive adoption bottleneck.
The technology was brilliant, but the operational burden on the customer was simply too high. It was preventing national scale.
Exactly. And that bottleneck forced TransMedics to completely pivot their business model. They launched the National OCS program, the NOP.
Right, the NOP. So instead of selling a machine, they started selling a turnkey solution. They took the burden entirely off the hospital. They basically said, hey, we will handle the surgical procurement. We will provide the OCS perfusion management using our own clinical specialists, over 200 of them now, I think.
Yeah, over 200.
And we will manage the entire aviation and ground logistics chain.
And insourcing that whole delivery mechanism fundamentally altered their revenue mix.
How so?
Well, they shifted from relying purely on product revenue, selling the consoles and the single-use disposable sets for each surgery,
Right.
to generating massive service revenue. They now bill for the clinical specialists, the flight hours, the ground transport. Right now, liver and heart transplants in the U.S. are driving the vast majority of this blended revenue stream.
And the clinical data from this shift is just undeniable in the sources. When TransMedics controls the entire chain, the outcomes improve dramatically.
Numbers are staggering.
Yeah, the data shows a 533% increase in DCD donors. That is a massive step change in national transplant volumes.
And the underlying catalyst for that volume increase, it's the removal of clinical variability.
Interesting.
By controlling the organ from the exact moment of procurement until it crosses the threshold of the recipient's operating room, TransMedics ensures their tech is used precisely to their specifications, every single time.
Right, because in acute medicine, removing operational variables directly translates to save lives.
And increased organ utilization.
But removing those variables meant taking full ownership of the physical movement of thousands of organs. You can't offer a turnkey logistics solution unless you actually control the logistics.
I really can't.
Which brings us to the aviation moat they are building. Looking at the Q1 2026 data, TransMedics now owns a dedicated fleet of 22 Embraer Phenom 300E aircraft.
22! It's wild.
And they built a dedicated aircraft maintenance hub in Dallas. And in that first quarter, this owned fleet covered 82% of all NOP flight missions. But I have to playfully push back on this strategy for a second.
Go for it.
MedTech companies historically rely on high-margin intellectual property.
Right.
Not managing weather delays in Dallas or dealing with volatile jet fuel prices. Isn't a medical technology company stepping way outside its lane by acting like an airline? Doesn't that expose them to massive operational hazards?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it actually makes perfect sense. Yes, the operational hazards, pilot shortages, engine maintenance disruptions, those are incredibly real.
Right.
But the economic math justifies the risk. Relying on third-party private aviation brokers in the medical emergency space leads to devastating margin stacking.
Margin stacking. So you're compounding the broker's finder fee, the charter operator's premium, and then I'm guessing some kind of last-minute urgency tax.
Exactly, which absolutely destroys unit economics at scale. By bringing the fleet in-house, TransMedics eliminates those compounded markups. But, and this is key, the strategy extends far beyond just cutting out the middleman.
Okay, what's the real value then?
The true value is operating leverage, driven by their logistics command center.
Ah, right, the heartbeat of the NOP.
Yeah, they have 90 full-time employees managing a 24/7/365 network. They're using a proprietary, IPA-compliant digital ecosystem platforms like NOP Connect, NOP Live, NOP Avia.
And that software infrastructure is fascinating.
Yeah.
Especially the routing technology they developed with MIT.
It's so smart. This isn't just basic dispatching. They are actively managing variable expenses, primarily jet fuel, across the entire network.
Oh, because fuel is such a massive cost.
Exactly. So they monitor fuel prices across 18 U.S. hubs in real time. If fuel spikes in one region, the algorithm dynamically floats or repositions their aircraft to hubs where fuel is cheaper.
Wow. So they are continuously optimizing the board to ensure those high variable costs don't crush their operating margins.
Right.
And get passed down to the transplant programs.
Right. It functions as a highly specialized air traffic control system, optimized simultaneously for biological viability and fuel efficiency. And this logistical blueprint is already being exported.
Right, the European expansion.
Yeah, the sources detail a massive strategic investment in PA Aviation in Paderborn, Germany.
And Paderborn's geography is totally intentional, right?
Yeah.
It places them within a 1 to 2 hour flight radius of virtually every major transplant hub in Europe.
Exactly. And that specific investment immediately injects an additional 9 Phenom 300 aircraft and over 40 highly trained pilots into their network.
So they're taking the exact NOP logistics model that worked in the U.S. and replicating it across Europe.
Country by country. They're already running commercial ops in Italy, where they purchased land in Mirandola for a new manufacturing facility.
Wow. I mean, if you are a competitor trying to enter this space, you can't just invent a slightly better warm perfusion console anymore.
Yo.
To actually compete, you would have to simultaneously replicate a 24/7 internationally scaled MIT routed aviation and ground network.
The moat is incredibly deep.
It is. But digging a moat of that magnitude requires a phenomenal amount of capital. I mean, buying 22 private jets and building international networks is incredibly expensive. We have to look at how this infrastructure load is hitting the balance sheet.
Yeah, you cannot build an international logistics utility without taking a sledgehammer to your short-term margins.
And the Q1 2026 earnings really show the weight of that. Their adjusted operating margin compressed heavily, dropping down to 10.4%,
Down from 20.7% in Q1 of the previous year.
which is a huge drop. And a massive driver of that infrastructure load is their new real estate footprint. We need to analyze the Somerville mega lease.
The capital commitment there is staggering. In January 2026, they executed a finance lease for a 498,286 square foot facility in Somerville, Mass.
Almost 500,000 square feet for a global HQ and R&D hub.
Right. And the mechanics of this lease are heavily impacting their current financials. The base rent is $23.9 million annually.
Wow.
And that scales up with 2% and then 3% yearly increases. But the kicker is that rent doesn't even commence until 2028.
Wait, 2028, so why is it hitting the P&L now?
Because the agreement includes a purchase option for $374.6 million in 2027. And accounting standards dictate that because they are reasonably certain to exercise that option, it's a finance lease.
So it pulls a massive $343.8 million liability directly onto their balance sheet today.
Exactly, long before they even fully occupy the space. And the P&L impact is aggressive. Adjusted SG&A spiked 41% year over year.
Yeah, the depreciation and amortization increased by $4.8 million for the quarter. And nearly half of that, $2.1 million, was purely from this Somerville lease. Plus, there was $3.8 million in imputed interest expense. And you combine that with funding the new OCS kidney R&D program, and it's obvious why that margin compressed to 10.4%. So what does this all mean for an investor looking at these numbers?
Well, management's framing is crucial here. They explicitly view this 10.4% margin as a floor, not a ceiling.
Okay, so it's the bottom. I look at this strategy kind of like building a massive multi-lane toll road.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. Like right now, they're paying for the concrete, they're buying the land rights, building the toll booths. The balance sheet looks heavy because the road isn't open yet. But the real payoff comes when the traffic scales.
Exactly. They are intentionally taking the margin hit now to build this insurmountable infrastructure moat. And their traffic projections are ambitious. They are targeting 10,000 to 30,000 transplants annually by 2030.
30,000 transplants. That's a massive jump.
It is, and achieving that heavily depends on expanding beyond their current dominance in heart and liver. Which brings us to the Gen 3 OCS kidney program.
Right, because management views the kidney segment as their largest potential market. I think the estimate is roughly 25,000 U.S. transplants per year.
Yep, a 25,000 TAM. And the inefficiency in the current kidney transplant ecosystem is just staggering.
Because of the discard rate, right?
Exactly. Roughly 10,000 viable kidneys are discarded every single year in the U.S. alone, primarily because of ischemic time. The organs sit in cold storage too long, they degrade, and they are thrown away while patients are dying on wait lists.
That's tragic. So TransMedics' strategy is to deploy OCS kidney to actively recover those discarded organs.
If they capture even a fraction of those 10,000 discarded kidneys, the fixed costs of the aviation fleet and the Somerville HQ get rapidly absorbed. The operating leverage flips from a drag to a massive tailwind.
But the kidney expansion is vital for another reason, right? Because they are facing some real market skepticism in their other legacy segments. Like the Q1 data showed a 30% year-over-year decline in lung revenue.
Yeah, the lung segment decline is a glaring weakness right now. The sources attribute a significant portion of this to what management calls competitive confusion impacting their DENOVO trial.
Right, competitive confusion. What exactly does that mean in this context?
Well, when competitors make conflicting claims or they abruptly alter their own trial protocols, it causes hospital review boards to hesitate.
Sure.
Transplant centers become reluctant to enroll patients in any new trials until the regulatory dust settles.
Which effectively stalls TransMedics' enrollment pipeline.
Exactly.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. To solve that exact vulnerability, TransMedics did something that is both scientifically brilliant and highly ironic.
You're talking about CHOPS.
Yes, the CHOPS regulatory dilemma, which they revealed at the April 2026 ISHLT conference.
Which stands for Controlled Hypothermic Organ Preservation System.
Right. And let's contextualize why this is so unusual. The entire foundational thesis of TransMedics, their absolute core IP, is warm perfusion.
Keeping the organ alive and warm.
Exactly. So why did the pioneer of warm organ preservation just spend R&D capital inventing a perfect FDA-regulated cold storage box?
It's all about the scientific baseline required for FDA trials. As we established, traditional cold storage is rudimentary. It's essentially a cooler with melting ice.
Unapproved commercial coolers like Yetis.
Right. And because the ice melts unevenly, the internal temperature fluctuates wildly. You cannot run a rigorous, statistically significant FDA trial, specifically their Enhanced Heart Part B trial, if your control group is a chaotic variable.
Oh, I see.
You can't scientifically prove the warm OCS console is superior if you're comparing it against a cooler where the temp swings by 10 degrees.
The lack of a stable baseline undermines the whole data set. So THAPS solves this by acting as an active cooling device that holds organs strictly between 4 and 12 degrees Celsius.
Exactly. By internally manufacturing this regulated cold box, TransMedics standardizes the scientific comparison. It generates pristine, level 1 clinical evidence that proves the warm perfusion of the next-gen OCS heart is unequivocally superior.
But the strategic genius here extends beyond just, getting a cleaner p-value. Because some analysts initially worried this was cannibalization.
Right. They thought proving cold storage could be good enough might narrow the market for their warm perfusion consoles.
But the forces highlight a much more aggressive tactical motive. Building CHOPS completely insulates their clinical trials from the exact competitive sabotage that damaged their lung segment.
It's bulletproof. Previously, they had to rely on competitor hardware to serve as the control arm. That meant a competitor could pull their product, change specs, or generate that panic and confusion.
But by manufacturing their own control device, TransMedics effectively owns both sides of the FDA trial. No competitor can interfere. They control the experimental arm with the OCS, and they control the baseline arm with CHOPS.
They own the entire testing ecosystem the exact same way they own the aviation logistics network. The thematic consistency across all their operations is striking.
It really is. They refuse to leave any critical variable to chance. They won't trust third-party pilots, they won't trust commercial dispatchers to optimize fuel, and they absolutely will not trust a competitor's cooler to validate their clinical data.
It forces a complete recalibration of how we view this company. They aren't just selling a medical device, they have engineered a sovereign ecosystem.
Right. They illustrate that true disruption often demands vertical integration at every conceivable level, from the R&D lab in Somerville to the precise thermal regulation of the trial groups to the MIT-backed routing algorithm all the way down to the cockpit of the jet delivering the organ.
And that transition from a hardware vendor to an infrastructure utility forces us to consider a much broader horizon.
Yeah, really provocative thought to end on here for the listener.
If TransMedics successfully establishes this impenetrable, highly regulated 247 national aviation and ground network specifically for the most delicate biological payloads on Earth, what other high-value medical or emergency logistics could this network eventually dominate, like next-generation gene therapies or custom cellular treatments requiring absolute temporal perfection?
Oh, wow. Yeah, completely controlled, turnkey, biological logistics utility. Makes you realize the warm perfusion hardware might have just been the Trojan horse to build the network.
Precisely.
Incredible. Yeah. Well, that wraps up our analysis for today. Risk defined, portfolio protected.